Las Vegas is probably one of the most active cities in the world, full of lights, shows, and of course gambling that goes on 24/7. It is truly a city that never sleeps, and I don't think the dead sleep there either. I was visiting Las Vegas on a business trip and ended up staying at the Luxor, which is a giant pyramid structure constructed back in 1993. It is an impressive piece of architecture. The interior has an Egyptian flair to it, and it's truly a wonder to look at. I was going to be there several days, and in my time off, I would check out the architecture and do a little gambling on the side. One time, while I was walking the floor of Luxor, I heard a woman crying, and I stopped and looked around. I was trying to find the source of the crying, but as I scanned the area, I didn't see anybody that looked like they were upset. I stood there for a few moments, and eventually the crying faded away, but it rattled me a little bit. I went off to do my work, and later in the day I returned to Luxor. As I was walking across the main lobby, I heard a scream that pierced my ears. It seemed to come from up high and then proceed down to the floor, followed by a terrifying impact of what sounded like a body hitting a hard tile floor. For the second time that day, I spun around, trying to figure out where this sound was coming from. I looked over. I could see the shape of a body on the floor of the hotel lobby. For some odd reason, nobody came running to check out what had happened. I glanced around, and everybody just seemed to be moving around like a normal day. I slowly crept up to the body on the floor. I could see it was female, and blood surrounded the head of whoever this was. I was totally grossed out, and fear gripped my heart. I glanced away to see if anybody was coming to help me or this poor woman. There were a few people checking in, but none of them glanced my way. When I turned back to the dead woman, I saw an empty floor. And for some reason, this frightened me even more than seeing a dead body, because nothing could explain what just happened. I stumbled away, finally bumping into one of the railings, where I slowly recovered myself as people moved around me, oblivious to what had just happened. Let's just say I had to get a stiff drink to settle my nerves. Once the alcohol took its effect, I started chatting with the bartender and asked him if there were any strange goings on at the Luxor. And at first they were a little hesitant to talk about anything bad happening where they worked. After a bit, they told me about a local prostitute who had worked that part of the town and also the hotel itself. This poor woman had learned she had contracted AIDS and thought it was a death sentence. And in those times, it probably was. So instead of suffering through this horrendous disease, she leapt from one of the upper floors, landing on the hard lobby floor, ending her life. The bartender went on to say that other people had reported seeing this woman wandering some of the halls or the lobby with blood dripping off of her face. This whole story sent a ripple of fear up my spine. I think the bartender saw the expression on my face, and they apologized. They even gave me another drink on the house. I had 3 more and went back to my room. I tossed and turned until I finally was exhausted and I went to sleep. But it was a sleep haunted by the scream of a woman falling to her death. I was surrounded by flame on all sides. It roared in my ears, and I could feel the heat starting to make my flesh burn. There was no place for me to run, and I let out a scream. The scream would wake me up in my Las Vegas hotel room, covered in sweat. I'd attended a convention in Las Vegas for my business. I like to describe Las Vegas as the world's largest black velvet painting. It's big, it's gaudy, but you can't help but stare at it. It's a city of excess and greed where people can find just about anything they ever dreamed of doing. I found it a bit much more than I can handle in those few days I was there. In my time off, a friend had told me that I had to go check out the volcano at Treasure Island. This was a huge pyrotechnic display that took place in front of a man-made lake with cliffs surrounding it. It happened about every half hour, and it always drew a crowd. I made my way up the strip and ended up in a bunch of people waiting on this chilly evening, wondering if this was even going to be worth it. Eventually, the low hum of music began, and then small gouts of flame popped out of the lake. One here, one there. It was fascinating. Eventually, these flames grew into huge pillars. The music pounded, and the flames got louder and bigger, and huge blasts of them so large that you could feel the heat from them from 70 to 100 feet away. It was thrilling and a little bit frightening at the same time. Because it was a cold fall evening, there weren't a lot of people there, and I stood there watching this extravaganza. But suddenly, out of nowhere, there was a man standing next to me, and he moaned in pain. I looked over, and his flesh was all bubbly and burnt from fire. He looked like he was on the verge of death. The sounds of the flames flying in the air roared in my ears, and I was frozen in place. The man waved his arms as if pleading for help and staggered toward me. I stumbled backwards and hit the rail nearby, almost tumbling into the man-made lake. I grabbed for it for dear life, and I got myself upright. Once I felt safe, I spun back, and the charred man was gone. I looked around at the other people, and they were just enjoying the show. I was so freaked out, I just ran away. Terror gripped my soul, and I was covered in cold night sweat. The next day, as I was traveling to go to the convention, I had to go past that man-made lake and those cliffs. And for some reason, I had to go into the resort because I had nagging questions in the back of my mind. I ended up talking to one of the desk attendants at the front desk. I started with just asking about the rates at the hotel, etc., and then I worked myself toward the fiery display. They said it had been going on for years. Eventually, I asked if there was anything out of the ordinary about this pyrotechnic display. And after a bit, they confessed that one of the workers who'd helped build it had been up on one of the cliffs when somebody decided to test one of the flame jets. This poor man was hit full on by a blast of flame that almost incinerated him on the spot. He'd staggered backwards and fell into the pond. He died not long after that. Others have said they have seen the ghost of this poor man during the volcano demonstrations. I counted myself as one of those people. It's one of the few things I wish I'd never seen or known about.